Hello, everyone. My name is Alejandra Schrader. I am not a scientist and I will not be talking about data. But instead, I am super excited to show you, sort of like as an advocate of the end user of all this wonderful data that will help provide more benefits for human health and planetary health, some of the stories and the insights as to how this all translates for the people and for the greater good of the greater number of people. To give you a little bit of a background, I was born in Chicago, but I grew up in Venezuela. And I grew up dirt poor under the care of a single mother. And I had two sisters, so we just, we didn't have a lot of food around. My mom, after my father left, had to make a choice between good education or good nutrition. And because it was her education that allowed her to move on and support and provide for her family, she chose to give us a good education. So that meant that, my sisters and I didn't have a lot of access to nutritious food. And instead, we had a lot of calorie-dense and highly processed foods. So the lack of access to nourishment in my early years and also bad eating habits had long-term effects on my health. I had pediatric gallbladder disease. I've dealt with anemia since I was a little girl, and I've dealt with obesity my whole life. At my heaviest, I was over 450 pounds. And so I have experienced firsthand what precisely is. I'm sorry, there you go. What it's like to not have access to nourishing, healthy, and delicious food. So the good news about this is that I have found a sense of purpose, and I want to ensure that good food is accessible to everyone, especially for Black, brown, people of color, indigenous groups, and marginalized populations around the globe. I work hard to inspire people that look just like me to find suitable ways to consume healthier foods and to consume a wider variety of nutrient-dense ingredients, especially edible plants. And that's where you all come in. I transitioned into a plant-centric diet about 6 years ago. It was a very selfish reason. I was dealing with health concerns, and my cholesterol, my triglycerides, my A1C, they were all really high. And after about the first 90 days, everything went to normal. And that was just the beginning for me. Oh. Here we go. So I had been told that I couldn't have children. And after becoming plant-based, and after 20 years of marriage, I became pregnant spontaneously with my first child. I was 46 years old. Everything that was expected of a woman like me with my weight, my age, they told me I would get preeclampsia and gestational diabetes and HELLP syndrome. And none of that happened in my pregnancy. In fact, I delivered a healthy little boy when I was 47 years old, naturally. I was pregnant for 42 weeks, so he was 2 weeks overbaked. And now at 49, I get to run behind this vivacious and energetic little man. So needless to say, plants have been amazing to me. So I am living proof that good food has the potential to promote optimal health and to help us thrive. Food is medicine. We don't have, however, a comprehensive understanding of what is in food, its biomolecular composition, and the interactions with our diets and health. This is why I'm so excited, truly, about my work with the Periodic Table of Food Initiative. Indigenous peoples, like my people, the Pemon and the Wayu people in Venezuela, have long claimed the curative properties of food. Having ancestral knowledge of food systems, they have maintained generation after generation that the same food that is good for people is also good for Mother Earth. Everything is connected. Sustainability was my first professional passion subject. I left a career in land development and planning, also architecture, because I've gone in wiggly ways, to transition into the culinary world. And it was imperative for me to carry that passion for the environment and focus on sustainability. At the time, that wasn't a very popular topic in the food or gastronomic space. On one end, I became extremely curious about how individual food choices and how the food that we ate and how we shopped and how we cooked and how we stored our food and how we consumed our food and how we wasted our food could impact our individual carbon footprints. And at the same time, I became super inquisitive about the food supply chain because the way that we produce our food can be very harmful for the planet. It disrupts ecosystems, it threatens biodiversity, diminishes soil health, and affects climate change. So my personal story and health issues, combined with this awareness about food and how it relates to human and planetary health, helped me shape what we refer to as my culinary POV, or my culinary point of view, which focuses on sustainable diets. So to give you a little sort of like quote from the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations, the sustainable diets are defined as, and I quote, those diets with low environmental impacts that contribute to food and nutritional security and to healthy lives for present and future generations. Sustainable diets are protective and respectful of biodiversity and ecosystems. They are culturally acceptable, accessible, economically fair and affordable. They're nutritionally adequate, safe and healthy, and optimize natural and human resources. After losing my food business, my brick and mortar, to COVID in March of 2020, I was given the opportunity to work on my first literary project, the Low Carbon Cookbook and Action Plan. This book is a love letter to Mother Earth, which I wrote from my kitchen. About 1/4 of the book is focused on the science behind the climate crisis and how it relates to food. I provide an action plan for those looking to minimize their individual carbon footprint by sharing a blueprint to eat more sustainably and by providing tips and recipes to upcycle foods, to minimize food waste, but also to consume a greater variety of edible plants. I want people to give plants a chance. One of my goals is to empower consumers to use their purchasing power to create a demand for diverse foods, especially ancient, forgotten, and heirloom foods. Having thorough knowledge of the biomolecular composition of our food can help us use low-carbon recipes to help close the gap of health and nutrition inequality and to promote biodiversity in the context of climate mitigation. As a plant-based nutrition certified chef, I have experienced the challenges of accessing science-based sources of information that depict food composition and their underlying dietary traits. When I was doing the due diligence for my cookbook, my biggest challenge was to find standardized nutritional information that allowed me to make comparative cases between ingredients. So I'm certain that the Periodic Table of Food Initiative will revolutionize food systems for human and planetary health. Advocates of the food as medicine movement like me will benefit from having access to PTFI's public, in-depth database of food composition information. It is very exciting to know that the scientific community and private sector will also be able to build on this public resource and add an analysis of different ingredients, food varieties, and cooking methods. I don't have to tell you, but there are tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands. Like the literature can provide such a wide range of numbers of edible plants on Earth. Most people around the world rely heavily on about 30 of those crops for needed calories and nutrients. And the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations says that about 2/3 of the world's supply of food comes from 3 crops: corn, maize, and wheat. We're doing a horrendous job at honoring the vast variety of food that Mother Earth has available for us. I often encourage people to eat the rainbow, to diversify their culinary palette, and to incorporate new plant-based ingredients into the foods that they already know how to cook and that they love. I'm not trying to turn anyone vegan, although it's not a bad thing. I just want everyone to eat more plants. Too many crops are being underutilized despite their amazing taste, nutritional density, and planet-friendly properties. So I'm quite excited to showcase some of the dishes that I've been creating for the PTFI. These dishes are bringing into the mainstream like ingredients that should be used by everyone. They provide new sources of nutrition to consumers, help improve the livelihoods of smallholder farmers, and create opportunities for local communities. I get to create a repertoire of planet-friendly dishes using sustainable, wholesome, and delicious ingredients. These dishes I get to cook in my home in Los Angeles. I put them in a box, I freeze them, and I ship them to the PTFI R&D lab in Colorado to be analyzed. And I cannot wait to learn the full biomolecular composition of my creations. Many of the dishes are made with very humble ingredients, such as legumes like pulses, beans, and peas. These are affordable and highly accessible. Some other of my dishes include food waste, parts of the plant that are traditionally thrown in the trash. I'm so excited to learn about these phytochemicals that are present in these food and get science-based confirmation that good food is nourished and sustainable, but it can also be in the place that we don't want it to be, which is the trash. Food systems contribute about 33% of the global greenhouse gases. To know the significant impact that food has on our environment can be daunting, but this also means that we can help combat climate change from our kitchen. A change in perspective, I believe, can make all the difference. From shopping smart to properly storing our food to cooking consciously and wasting less, we as cooks could become educated consumers to be part of the solution and to help tackle some of the global challenges around food. I believe that individual actions can make a big difference as part of a collective effort. In Venezuela, we say, pon tu grano de arena, put your grain of sand so you can help build a mountain. According to a recent report by ReFed, a national nonprofit organization that is dedicated to ending food loss and waste, about 33% of food in the US, or 80 million tons, goes to waste every year. It is estimated that food waste accounts for about 1/4 of greenhouse gas emissions from food, and that represents 6% of the total anthropogenic global emissions. Throwing away our food means dumping valuable natural resources such as water, energy, and more. As it ties to the Sustainable Development Goals, Sustainable Development Goal number 12 calls for responsible consumption and production. One of the targets set forth to achieve this goal is to halve our global food waste by per capita and the consumer levels to reduce food losses. Reducing food waste could be among one of the top 3 solutions of 80 proposed by Project Drawdown to reduce heat trapping gases. By the way, all these 3 dishes are made with food waste ingredients. So what if we reimagine food waste as the new cool ingredient? Knowing that food waste is such a big contributor to the climate crisis has motivated me to find creative ways to use food and ingredients that traditionally end up in the trash bin. From peels and seeds to stalks and leaves, I use as much of each ingredient that I buy as possible. I advocate from the root to leaf approach, very similar to animal source proteins. People talk about the nose to tail, right? And I like to motivate cooks, both amateur and well-versed, to practice this same philosophy in their own homes and kitchen. Because of the limited resources that we had in my home growing up, we just couldn't afford to waste any food. And I'm just really grateful that I learned from a very early age from my family, my mother, my mamaita, my grandmother, how to just respect our food and make the most out of it. So the good and bad news for my husband is that no matter how long I've lived, thank you, outside of Venezuela, Venezuela is still very deeply ingrained in me. So I am very resourceful in the kitchen and I plan my family's meal. Some of my friends call me the MacGyver in the kitchen. I store food properly to avoid wastage. I refrigerate leftovers and serve them again at different times. And I repurpose food to create new dishes. Of the many, here we go. Of the many staple ingredients in Venezuelan cuisine, plantain is probably one of the top and one of my favorites. It's part of our national dish called el pabellón criollo. I remember the first time when the humanitarian crisis started that I talked to my mom, and my mom said, well, you know, it's really hard to access food, any kind of food. And so people started to get really resourceful. So now we use the plantain peels to make meat. And I couldn't believe what she had just said. So once I went home and I made my sofrito and I boiled my peels and I shredded them and I cooked them in a nice tomato broth with spices and I served them with rice. I just couldn't believe what I was tasting. So this culinary approach that was born out of need in times of crisis now helps people put food on the table. Now, the challenge that I had when I was working on my book is that there's a very limited amount of nutritional information available for plantain peels. Although most sources agree that it's rich in, as we would expect, dietary fiber, potassium, and folic acid. This is one of the reasons why I'm quite excited to see what the PTFI has to say about plantain peels so that we can confirm some of the things that our people have been talking about for generations and generations. I'm a proud Afro-Latina, and aside from indigenous roots, I also have African roots in me, and hallacas are one of those dishes that represent that bicultural heritage in Venezuela. They were something similar to tamales, you know, but I think they were the original food waste dish. The slaves would use the scraps that came from the landowners and they will mix them up in a pottage with beans, and then they'll have a nice bed of corn masa over a banana leaf, and they will stuff them up, wrap them around and steam them. And it will make the most delicious food, a food that we still create today to replicate what our ancestors did. And as a way to honor this heritage, but also do something nice for Mother Earth, I created a version of it that doesn't have any meat and that instead uses plantain peels. Talk about low carbon food. I want to show you, and I know my time is running out. I want to show you this, one of my favorite food waste ingredients, which is papaya seeds. My people in the Pemon tribe of Venezuela have been using papaya seeds for their anti-cancerous properties, to fight infections, to improve digestion and kidney function. Talk about indigenous knowledge, bringing something to the table. They're believed to contain powerful antioxidants, fiber, and heart-healthy fats. I cannot wait to see that the PTFI data confirm some of these facts. And I've sort of already come to terms like, you know, maybe some of the things that are claimed for these foods are not true. So at the very least, we'll be able to bust some myths, but then know what the true values of the food are. Because food waste may add nutritional value to our diets, it has health benefits, but allows us also to combat carbon footprint and climate change, but at the same time, it helps us save money. So I think that makes food waste a very cool ingredient, if you ask me. As an ambassador of the Sustainable Development Goal number 2, which is zero hunger, I see so many practical applications for the PTFI database. Beyond access to sustenance and nourishment for people worldwide, it could also have positive repercussions for smallholder farmers and their livelihoods, and allowing for new markets and better profits. As a mother of an infant, I value the positive impact that it could have on the development of suitable dietary plans to enhance childhood nutrition. Having access to high quality nourishment is essential for growth and the maintenance of life. As an eco chef, I appreciate having the access to a comprehensive database that will help design nutrient-rich dishes and to provide local and seasonal swaps that match that nutritional profile. And with this information at hand, we will have so many tools to promote biodiversity and sustainability at a whole new level. I'm just so grateful for the opportunity to work with the PTFI on this project, because we all have a responsibility to help build a sustainable future and to lend Mother Earth a helping hand. Thank you so much for listening. So I hope I made you guys really hungry, because now we have a tasting. Yeah, this was like just a visual parade. We have a tasting right outside, and I wanted to make it a point to showcase, so I requested to showcase some of the local ingredients present here in Atlanta. So we have shrimp from the Gulf Coast. We have seasonal vegetables that are grown very local. We have a fruit salad that features, of course, the Georgia peach. And we also have a black-eyed pea hummus. I love to use traditional recipes and shift them up with ingredients that are just easier to access or more available to you, that are cheap, because there's nothing cheaper than a can of beans. But also the items that we're tasting, I think it gives us the opportunity to talk about how food touches so many aspects of our lives, right? Like, so the food, we're talking about local and seasonal. We're talking about sustainable. When we bring beans to the table, we're talking about, as I call it, the OG plant-based protein, but also the most sustainable food group and my favorite food group on the planet. By featuring local fruits, we can always, when we have the data available, try to replicate some of these nutritional qualities of the food that we know and love. So I hope you enjoy the tasting. I'll be out there ready to answer some questions. But I want you to just take home that gem that the food that we eat can make such a big difference for our health and the planet, and that we all have to be stewards of the planet and help promote that kind of food. Thank you again.